Folks, Bob Jaeger here, and today on our first part of the Campcraft and Cookery, we're going to dig a proper fire pit, not just for heat but for cooking purposes. So let me show you how that looks. I'm going to go through it in stages, so after I get a part done I'm going to show you that part, and then we're going to construct the whole thing. Alright, so basically it's hard to see with the way the sun's shining on us, so I'll try to get a good angle. So what I did was I dug a pit, and I'm going to use my finger to trace it out. I dug a pit that's about 28 inches wide and about 40 inches long, and then around, and then I dug this hole right off the side like a keyhole, okay, because we're doing a keyhole pit. The purpose of this keyhole is I have my main fire over here for heat, for boiling water, whatever it may be, but when I'm cooking meats, I'm cooking things that need to take time over a grill or something like that, and that's when I'm going to drag some of those coals back into this hole here to create a kind of little heat chamber, right? A stove of sorts. And I put a rack over top, or you can cook your meat right on the fire, on the coals if you want to. So this primary area here is for fire. This is for coals, okay? And that's really important because we boil water and things like that with fire, but we cook on coals. So if we're cooking with our skillet, if we're making meats over a grill, if we're doing something over a spit, we're going to cook it right here where the coal bed would go, okay? But also another reason I dig them like this, and I'm about 40 inches because the logs I'm going to be using are about 40 inches long, not for the fire, but for the thermal backing on the back. So I'm putting a thermal wall on the back where that pile of dirt is, right up against the fire, and then I'm going to be piling that dirt up against the back of it and creating an earth mound on the back of it. And over time I'd add to that just so it goes up to mostly the back of the wall. But really what I'm looking for, take all the dirt out of here, and I'm going to pile it back here, leaving myself about this much space between the dirt pile and the hole, okay? And I'm going to put 4 stakes in, one here, one here, oh, let me do it, one here, and 2 on the other end. Then I'm going to drop my logs down in between. I'm going to have them stacked up probably about 2.5 to 3 foot, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to take this mound of dirt and just push it up against the back of that wall. Now, a lot of people think that that's called a heat reflector. It's not. It's a thermal wall. Basically, what it does is it allows it so the heat from your fire isn't escaping out the back of the fire pit, for one. Number two, with the earth mount behind it, it insulates my fire pit pretty well, okay? And that's really the purpose of it. Sometimes you'll see people build one along the back wall and then one on each side. You can do that if you like, but I think that gets in my way because I want to use camp cooking irons and things that we make on the sides and on the front here. So I don't want a wall all the way around it. Now, one thing you do have to be cautious of is wind direction. So right now, my wind direction is going across my fire like this, okay? That because back here, I want to be able to put, you know, if my kids want to set up a tent or anything like that, they can have that back here in this area here, and then the fire pit's over there, or they can even get a little bit closer if it's colder out right about here. But I can have a fire going all night. When I wake up in the morning, we can come out and we can make our coffee and our breakfast and everything, right? So this is the general shape you're looking for. So large rectangle, and honestly the length of your fire pit's going to be determined upon the wood that you find to build your thermal wall in the back. Now for me, I can make that as long as I want it to be. I want it to be a tad bit longer than what the actual fire pit is, but I've been going around our pasture and stuff and cutting down locust trees, so I got plenty of hardwoods, and that's what you really want to use is hardwoods if you can. Some people use pine or cedar because that's all they got. Just be careful with that. Maybe have your thermal wall back away from your fire pit about 1 foot so it's not getting too hot because it will burn. But this locust is great hardwood to use for this kind of thing. It's all twisted, so I can't make my bows out of it or anything. I'm saving pieces like this for making bow staves and stuff, but I have plenty of that stuff that I can cut up and use as my thermal wall. Now, do you need a thermal wall? No, you don't. But need versus function. You don't need it, but your fire pit's going to function better with it. Not to mention, it gives you a place to rest things on. It gives you a place to dry tinder. You can use your thermal wall to set things on to dry tinder so they don't get charred by the fire, right? So if you have some horseshoe fungus or anything like that, we'll show that in future videos. But for right now, all you want to do is take a good long handle steel shovel. If you want to use your little special forces dugout shovel, you're more than welcome to. But let me just give you a little tip. My family used to run cemeteries for a business, and we did it old school. We dug graves by hand. What my dad and I found out over the years was, for one, a good pair of shoes. These are roofers' shoes. They work pretty good, but I usually wear boots out in the woods, okay? Good steel toe boots I wear out in the woods. Depends on how far you're hiking. When you put your shovel in, I'm left-handed when I use a shovel, okay? A lot of people will be right-handed. So if you're right-handed, you might want to use your left foot and stand on the right side of your shovel, and you just press your weight down. That's all you're doing. You're not kicking it. Press your weight down. I'm left-handed when I swing a shovel, so generally I'll put my right foot so my leg is in line with the shovel. I'm outside of the shovel, okay? And you just press down, and wiggle, okay? And when you get that far, you're going to find a lot of roots and everything else. Do yourself a favor and cut out a spot. See, I could just press down into this and just carve myself out a chunk. That way I'm not wrestling with grass and roots and everything else. You get that chunk out, you can get it out of your way. Now typically when I'm digging a hole like this, what I typically do is I'm going to bust it all up. So I'm going to create a grid. I'll trace out my line, the main rectangle first, okay? Then I'll draw lines across like this with the shovel, digging about the depth of the shovel. Then I'll go down through like this, about the depth of the shovel. So when I dig in, you'll notice, if you look at my shovel, the hole's as deep as the spade of my shovel, okay? Because for your fire pit, you don't need it to be any deeper than that. You'll be fighting that fire if it goes any deeper than that. So you have it, and you just press it down in. So I'm cutting out pieces, and then I go around and clean those pieces out and throw them at least a foot or two back behind where I'm going to have my thermal wall. That way I'm not having to move dirt later on. If I throw it all around the circle, I'm going to have to move it all back here anyway. So I want to just keep it where I'm working at, okay? I recommend that when you're cleaning out the hole, do the main rectangle first and clean out from this side of your hole and throw across. That way when you get tired and you got to clean out this side, you're closer to your dirt pile and you don't have to throw it as far. After you're done with your main rectangle, then just cut out, this is about 2 foot by 2 foot square, roughly, right? It's a little longer than it is wide, but 2 foot by 2 foot square for my cooking center. This is where I'm going to do most of my meat cooking, sausages, breakfast, things over a skillet and grilling, okay? Once again, you can make that bigger if you want to, but it doesn't need to be. You're not going to have a lot of coals in here, depending on how big your fire is. You're going to have enough to cook on and to keep this fire going, okay? But what this fire pit allows us to do is it does allow us to bank up a lot of the coals for the nighttime, which is really important. So we have this nice depth, and we can keep adding wood all day to keep the bugs away and cook food and things like that, keep a pot of coffee on. And then throughout the night, what we could do is put fresh logs down in the bottom there and put the hot coals over top and cover that with ash, and that'll burn all night long. So when you wake up in the morning, you'll have a fire. You can actually keep a fire going like that for months, really, if you keep it going. So this is the first part, and then we'll get into building the thermal wall. I'm probably going to cut all the pieces, show them to you. Then I'm going to turn the camera off and hammer everything in, set it all up, and then I'm going to show you how I lash it together. Okay, be pretty self-explanatory. But for a Campcraft and Cookery project, this is probably one of the most laborious tasks, meaning a lot of labor. It's not too bad. It took me about maybe 8 minutes to dig this hole out because I have a nice sharp, I do sharpen my shovels, nice sharp steel shovel with a long handle on it. That long handle gives us leverage, right? I use a fiberglass handle simply because they typically don't break on me unless you're really prying really hard, and then it's not going to rot by me leaving it out here at the camp. Other than that, it's really about cutting your logs, getting your lengths. Look for dead woods first, dead hardwoods first, that are good lengths to go the width of your fire pit. They can be a bit longer if you want them to be. But not too much longer. It's not necessary. You might want to make them 2 feet longer on each end, just so you can hang pots and pans on it if you want to, okay? But you dig this out, And this is the first part of our Campcraft and Cookery series, simply because it's a simple project, but it shows you how much work can be involved in doing one of these projects, okay? So my kids and I and my wife are going camping out here tonight, and I wanted to get the fire pit dug out, even though I have another one back in the woods. I don't want to sleep in the woods tonight. I want to sleep out where the air is blowing really good because it's hot out. What I want you to keep in mind is we're doing simple cuts. We're going to do simple cuts on the logs that we put for our thermal wall. We're going to do simple cuts to make the points for our stakes. We're going to do a simple construction with simple lashings. And the reason we're doing that is it's showing you how to work with your axe, it's showing you how to work with your saw, and it's showing you how to work with basic lashings. So I'll see you in the next part. Very timely. So over the years, I've helped plenty of outdoorsmen, scouts, U.S. forestry people, and folks, do these fire pits and do the campcraft type thing. The reason is because a lot of times those guys are going to be out there for days at a time or even weeks at a time, and they want to kind of make it as home. I work with a lot of trappers. A lot of trappers that I work with, I teach virtually online. They're up in Alaska and places like that. They'll be out on a trap line for 2 or 3 weeks, living in their cabin. But they want that outdoor kitchen area. And one thing I tell them is, you don't have to wait until everything's done to start using everything, okay? And I want you guys to keep that in mind too. You might only have a day to get off of work to go out and do something in the woods, and you want to get that fire pit done and get to cooking. You don't have to wait until you have your thermal wall up. In another video, we made our tripod. Let me see if I can get that in the shot. See that? We made the tripod, and I could stand that until I get my thermal wall built. Let's see if I can flip this thing around for you. I could stand that. Oop, I'm falling in a hole. I could stand that right over top of my tripod. So basically I'd have the 2 legs out like that, 1 leg in the back, and it's right over top of my tripod. And I can use that temporarily to hang my pots on. Do I have my thermal wall up? No, I don't. Do I have my pot stands and pot hangers set up and everything that I'm gonna make? No, I don't. Because I don't have to wait that long. I have the hole dug, I have my cooking area, my fire area on the pit. I already have my tripod lashed from other outings that I've done, or you can lash one very quickly. I've showed you how to do that. And you can set it up right over your fire. You can even bring a metal dog chain with you, like a cat leash, dog chain, that kind of thing, and wrap it around the top of your tripod up here and use that as your hanger so you can adjust it faster if you want to. I've seen plenty of people do that, okay? But the thing here is you might find that this work is a little more than you expected it to be, and you don't want to hurt yourself. You know, it might be really hot out or really cold out, and you just need to get things going, or you can't find the resources that you're looking for, and you got to hike around a bit to find it, and you're not going to find it before dark. Don't let that stop you, okay? You assess your situation. This is where journaling is important. I told you I'd talk about this during this series. When we journal, the things that we do, for one, I'm going to write in my journal, and I'll show you guys later, the dimensions of this fire pit. I'm going to say what tools I needed to do this. I'm going to say what I expected it to be like and what it actually ended up being like, or what actual resources I was able to find to put this thing together in the area that I'm in. Then I'm going to mark the navigation points of that area. So if I had to hike into this area, which I just walk obviously through the woods from my house to this area, if I had to hike in this area and I'd never been here before, I'm going to put navigation markers throughout. I'm going to look for landmarks that I can leapfrog from. I'm going to look at my coordinates on my GPS or on my compass and my map, and I'm going to journal that for this, so I know that if I want to do something similar, or I need those same kind of resources, I know what area to find them in, or I know what areas I'm not going to find them in. So I'm going to write down all the dimensions, and then I'm going to also, for personal journaling at the tail end of that, I'm going to write down what I expected to be able to accomplish, what I actually accomplished, whether it's more or less, and why that was. Was it my expectations were set too high, too low, meaning I thought this was going to take all day and it only took a few minutes, right? And I didn't have anything else planned. Was it physical limitations, something I have to be careful of or mindful of? Do I have to bring ibuprofen with me? Yes, I do. What are the different things that I can journal that really helps me represent my emotional state in that situation? So later on down the road, if I'm at another location and I want to do the same project, I'm going to look back, I'm going to read that journal, I'm going to be like, oh, I got to make sure those resources are there. And if I have a friend in the area, I'm going to be like, hey, could you make sure there's some down hardwoods in the area? I'm going to build a fire pit out there and this kind of thing. Is there soft ground for me to dig in? Is it away from a pine-based root system so I don't want to burn the forest down, right? I might call and ask these kind of questions. Am I allowed to dig a fire pit like that? Usually I do it on my own property, so it's not a big deal. But what I'm getting at here for you folks is journaling is going to allow you to kind of calculate what you need. It's going to allow you to assess your physical abilities and limitations, but it's also going to get you to go back home with thoughts that's going to help you in the future outings. You might be like, man, I was breathing like crazy. You know, I could barely breathe out there. Well, do you smoke? If so, now would be time to quit if you want to do this more often, right? Maybe you were sweating so profusely you just couldn't stay dry. Couple extra t-shirts, couple extra towels to keep yourself wiped off, and a bunch of extra water to keep yourself hydrated, or at least big containers that you can collect an abundant amount of water in, that you can boil over this fire pit, that you can set aside and later fill your water bottles with to drink from, or even cook from, right? Maybe the walk was longer than you thought it would be with your loadout, with the amount of weight. Obviously, I run tool heavy, so a lot of times I bring conveyance, whether it's my little tractor, it's the Land Rover, a quad, a sled, whatever it may be. I don't mind dragging something through the woods. If it's not that far to walk, I don't mind driving the tractor or quad or Land Rover through the woods if I'm not going to get stuck, right? If I have a good area to drive through. But most importantly, I don't mind packing some load on my back, primarily if some of those things I'm going to leave behind, like the shovel. I have a fixed camp, and that's what this kind of fire pit's for. It's a fixed camp fire pit. You wouldn't generally dig out an elaborate fire pit like this for a place you're just going to go day hiking to, okay? But if it's a place where you're normally going to camp and you have permission to do so, this is a great thing to be doing. Just like my fixed camp, my hunting camp back in the woods, that's primarily for hunting. I don't want to be out in this field area here. There's a big field back here. My garden's over here. I got all this area up next to the woods. I don't want to be camping out here in the wintertime. I want to be back in the woods. And here's why. The deer on our property come from the other properties over here and up there. They don't come from back here. They go to back here, okay? So many times I'll be camping back there, but I'm posted out here when it comes to hunting time. I don't have a fire going while I'm hunting or anything like that. Maybe back in the woods I will, but not out here where I hunt. I'm going to hunt next to the field where I have a better chance of getting game. I'm going to process that game back in my camp. And I'm going to do my sleeping and firing and cooking and everything back in my camp, okay? So another thing to journal, that location. Why did I choose that spot? That very specific spot in the 100 square yard area or 100 square feet area that I'm in. Why did I choose that spot? Why did I arrange the fire pit where I could have made it straight with everything else? I arranged it kind of cocked on an angle like this. Why did I do that? Well, I did that because back in here with this foliage in the back, a small sleep system right here, I have this blocking me from any elements behind me, right? And no animals are coming through there, wind, all that stuff. And I can sleep right here and I can be close to the fire. If I'm all by myself, I can self-feed that fire. There's plenty of space back here behind me and over here right beside the pit for the kids to set up their tents and things like that so they can stay warm at night on the colder months and everything, right? I'm away from the tree line, which is important to me. I have plenty of room behind this to have what I call our sitting fire. I wouldn't always want to fill that big fire pit up, but I have the luxury of having all this property I can do what I want with. But I don't always want to fill that big fire pit up with logs and stuff. Sometimes my son and I will come out, or my daughter and I will come out and make some coffee and hot cocoa and sit out here until it's 10 o'clock at night. And then we'll hike it back to the house. So I might have just a little sitting area over here with a tiny little fire that we use to cook coffee on and gives us a little ambient light, a little bit of heat. But I don't necessarily need to fill up this big one. These are things I journal. We have all these thoughts. For those of us that like doing this type of thing in general, or even YouTube in general, we have these thoughts all the time. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Okay, first, what's more important than how-to is why. How-to is not as important as why. What you need, meaning your tools and everything, and why you're doing it, and what purpose is it going to serve for you, okay? I like to be like a little kid and ask why to everything. Why? Okay, I'm going to dig this fire pit here, but I don't want it straight. Why? Well, I want it on an angle, so if I'm bedded down back here, I can just feed that fire, cook on the fire right from my sleep system. Well, why? Well, for convenience. I don't want to have to keep putting my boots on in the middle of the night and get out in the wet weather and all that stuff if I don't have to. And I get this windbreak behind there. Well, why is that important? Well, it also keeps the bigger game from walking through on top of me while I'm sleeping at night. Okay. See, I can keep going like that. And that's the way you process your journal. You keep asking yourself questions of why and writing down the answers, the descriptions. This is why I do this. These are the things that I'm going to need, the what's that I'm going to need. And the how-tos are things that come along. Okay, think about it. You're out in the woods, you got your brand new $200 axe for the first time, or your $20 axe, right? You go out in the woods and you try to chop with it and the thing's not cutting. You're like, why? Well, it's not very sharp, it's pretty blunt. Oh. How do I sharpen it? See, from the whys and the whats, the how-tos come to you, those questions. You say, well, I'll just use my saw today and I'll split with the axe. It can at least split. I just may not be able to cut with it. I may not be able to shave wood with it and do campcraft with it. I'll worry about that next time. Or you're out in a place where you have cell signal or something. So you get on YouTube and you say, how to sharpen an axe in the field. And you look at it and it says, well, you need this puck stone and you need an axe file. And you're kind of like, crap, I don't have those things. But another video might say, go down to the creek bed and find a smooth, round rock. And that'll get you through until you get home where you can properly sharpen your axe. Because there's field sharpening and shop sharpening, right? Shop sharpening is what we do at home. Field sharpening, we're just dressing it up. But from the whats and the whys came, how do I do this? Because it was necessary. We wanted to know how to because it became a necessary thing. We didn't learn how to just in case someday we might need that information. We didn't fill our heads with extra stuff. Because of the things we do, we want to know how to. That's the way our brains are supposed to work, folks. Okay? So by journaling, when you come up with those questions, you have your carpenter's pencil and your Write in the Rain notebook, and you sit down and you're like, you know what? I'd really like to know the purpose of one of those Dakota fire pits. Like, why would somebody dig that? Like, I dug this big one, and man, I am sweating. Woo, that's a lot of work. I got a lot of wood to cut. I got this big fire pit, but I don't always need all that. Isn't there a smaller fire pit that I could dig? I saw some guy do a Dakota fire pit. I wonder what that's all about. How do you do that? You don't go right to it and say, hey, I'm going to figure it out right now. No, write that in your journal. In the back of your journal, notes for home. How to dig a Dakota fire pit, small cooking fire pit for hiking. Write those things down. Those are search terms. You come home, you go on Google, you search those things, go on YouTube and search those things. You might find an article on a blog, or you might find a video done, and you're like, oh, cool. Then you draw a picture of it in your journal, write down the measurements, tools that you'll need, how long it typically takes to do that type of thing, and what you will use that for. And you say, well, Bob, I can't draw. If you can draw circles and lines, you can draw. You'll be fine, okay? Just draw a reasonably good representation of what you're going to do, okay? But then you have those measurements in there. But not only that, if you got kids, or you're very young and someday you plan on starting a family and having kids, you're going to have that journal forever if you take care of it. You're going to have it forever. Even after you fill it up, you file it on a bookshelf where it's easy for you to find. You can refer back to it. There's going to be things in every journal that you have you're going to recreate in the next journal, because those are the things you always want to have in there. You always want to remember pace counts, things like that, navigation points, those kind of things. But for those designs and drawings and things, you want to make sure that they're in books that you can hand down to your children, or you can use to teach your children. I can't tell you how many things I forgot. I know that I've forgotten more. I've forgotten more than I know now. I know that. But through journaling, I look back through my journals. I'm like, man, that's a good idea. I think I'll teach kids how to make a bow stave today and show them how to kiln dry that thing so we can make our own long bows, right? Just take your time. Journal everything by the steps, and don't wait until everything's complete. You can start using it, okay? The thermal wall can come later for you. All right, take care.